In 15th-century Spain, power burned hotter than any flame. The king who sat upon the throne of Castile was no ordinary ruler. King Alarico II was a man of fear and faith, his crown heavy not just with gold, but with the weight of divine judgment. To his mind, sin was disease, and he was the physician sent by God to burn it away. Alarico's palace rose like a fortress above Toledo, its stone towers overlooking the wide plains where heretics once prayed in secret. He was a man whose eyes glowed with conviction and whose heart had turned to iron under the pressure of belief. From a young age, Alarico had been molded by priests and soldiers alike. He had seen the church wield fear as a weapon, and he learned that pain could be a tool of purity. When he took the throne, he did not seek peace or glory. He sought cleansing. He believed that his reign was the torch that would burn away the sins of Spain. The Inquisition was his blade. Its judges and torturers answered to no one but him and the cross they served. They were the architects of pain, men who saw torture not as cruelty but as salvation. And Alarico rewarded them with gold, land, and favor. To him, every confession was proof that evil could be destroyed through suffering. But behind the king's holy mask was a man haunted by shadows. Alarico's nights were sleepless, filled with visions of flames licking at his own soul. He would rise before dawn, pacing the marble halls of his palace, whispering prayers that sounded more like pleas. His confessor said the visions were divine warnings, and Alarico believed it. He saw devils in every doubt, heresy in every whisper. He became obsessed with purity. He ordered his priests to test the loyalty of even the most faithful. Servants disappeared overnight. Nobles were dragged from banquets to dungeons beneath the palace. Each accusation fed his paranoia, and each confession fed his hunger for righteousness. The fires of faith burned higher, consuming all who stood too close. Among his prized instruments of punishment was the lead sprinkler, a small, ornate device shaped like a holy relic. Its handle was engraved with angels, its hollow tip designed to pour molten truth upon the wicked. It had been a gift from the Inquisitor General himself, a tool said to separate the pure from the damned. Alarico kept it near him, displayed beside his sword and crown. Though he never wielded it himself, he often watched. From the shadows of the dungeons, he observed as the device dripped its liquid agony onto trembling flesh. He watched how the victims screamed, how their confessions poured out like boiling metal from their lips. He saw it as a ritual, a purification of body and soul. To him, pain was proof of redemption. His courtiers spoke of him in hushed voices, calling him the King of Fire. Some said he was chosen by God, others whispered that he had been cursed. His own wife, Queen Isidora, began to fear him. She saw how his faith had turned to madness. The king, who once read poetry by candlelight, now read only scriptures of wrath and judgment. In public, Alarico was the image of divine authority. He rode through the streets on a white horse, his armor gleaming like the sun, blessing the crowds that knelt before him. But behind the palace gates, his rule was carved from silence and screams. The inquisitors moved like ghosts through the night, taking names from secret lists, and always the king watched. One night, as a storm raged over Toledo, Alarico descended into the dungeons. The flickering torches cast monstrous shadows along the walls. The air smelled of iron and ash. He stood before the chamber where the lead sprinkler rested upon a stone table. Its metal surface gleamed in the dim light, as if waiting for new sin to purify. Father Thomas, his confessor, followed behind him carrying a small silver cross. "Your Majesty," he murmured, "you do not need to come here yourself. The inquisitors will handle the questioning." Alarico turned, his face pale and his eyes burning. "I am the hand of God," he said quietly. "If I do not see the cleansing, how will I know it is done?" The priest bowed his head, saying nothing more. He had seen the king's faith twist into something darker than zeal. He had seen what the lead sprinkler could do. As lightning split the sky above, the king reached out and touched the device. It was cold to the touch, deceptively beautiful. "A drop of fire can save a soul," he whispered. "Pain is not cruelty, it is truth." That night, the king ordered a new inquisition, one that would not spare even the nobles of his court. He believed heresy had crept into his own walls. He believed the devil himself had taken human form among his servants, and the lead sprinkler would be his instrument of revelation. Word spread through the city by dawn. Fear gripped every heart, from peasants to priests. No one knew who would be accused next. The bells of the cathedral tolled like an omen, echoing across the river. The people prayed, but their prayers felt hollow, their faith trembling beneath the weight of terror. In the days that followed, the palace gates remained closed. Only the inquisitors entered and left, their robes stained with smoke. The cries from below the earth grew louder, then silent. The king's sermons became longer, his tone harsher. He spoke of divine purification, of flames that would cleanse the world of its filth. His followers cheered, but their eyes betrayed fear. At night, Queen Isidora wept alone. She remembered the man she had married, a ruler of wisdom and mercy. Now she saw only the shadow of faith twisted into cruelty. She knew that the lead sprinkler was more than a weapon. It was a mirror, reflecting the king's own burning soul. In his private chambers, Alarico prayed until his knees bled. He saw visions of angels with molten wings and demons whispering in the dark. He heard voices urging him to cleanse the impure, to purge even his own bloodline if necessary. He took these voices as divine command. The fire within him had become his god. And in the silence of the night, when all others slept, King Alarico II would stand at his window, watching the torches flicker below. The dungeons waited, the lead sprinkler gleamed, and the kingdom trembled beneath the weight of one man's faith turned to fire. Quick reminder, if you are enjoying the video, please do like the video and subscribe the channel for more historical torture content. The dungeons beneath King Alarico's palace were built for silence. Thick stone walls swallowed every sound, and the air hung heavy with the stench of sweat, ash, and rusted iron. Torches burned low, casting wavering light over chains, tables, and instruments that glimmered like sleeping serpents. Among them lay the lead sprinkler, waiting patiently for its next victim. The inquisitors gathered before dawn, robed in black, their faces half hidden beneath cowls. At their head stood Father Thomas, the king's confessor, his hands trembling as he blessed the room. He had seen too many souls broken here, too many bodies turned to offerings of pain. Yet duty bound him to serve. The king called it holy work, and who dared question the word of a monarch chosen by God? King Alarico entered soon after, flanked by 2 guards. His eyes burned brighter than the torches, and his voice carried the weight of divine command. "Bring in the accused," he said. His tone was calm, almost tender, but it chilled every man in the chamber. The door creaked open, and a woman was dragged inside. Her dress was torn, her wrists bound with rope. She was the queen's handmaiden, a girl barely 20, accused of whispering heretical prayers in secret. Her name was Elira, though to the inquisitors she was nothing more than a soul to be purified. She was thrown to her knees before the king. "My lord," she gasped, "I have served the queen faithfully. I have done no wrong." Alarico studied her as if she were an insect beneath glass. "You deny the whispers?" he asked. "You deny consorting with heretics?" "I swear by the Virgin herself." "Swear not by saints," the king interrupted sharply. "Swear by your pain. Only pain reveals truth." He motioned to the chief inquisitor, who stepped forward with gloved hands. He lifted the lead sprinkler, its hollow bulb gleaming in the torchlight. Beside him, a small pot of molten lead simmered over coals, glowing like liquid sun. The heat filled the room, and even the guards turned their faces away. Father Thomas swallowed hard. "Your Majesty," he whispered, perhaps questioning with words may yet yield. Alarico silenced him with a glance. "Words are deceit. Fire never lies." The inquisitor dipped the lead sprinkler into the molten metal. A faint hiss echoed as the device filled with glowing liquid. When lifted, a thin trail of silver fire dripped from its tip. The sight was terrible and mesmerizing. Elira trembled, tears carving paths down her soot-stained cheeks. "Please, mercy," she cried. "I am innocent." The king stepped closer. "Then God will protect you," he said softly. "If your soul is pure, the pain will pass swiftly." The first drop fell upon her shoulder. The scream that followed was sharp enough to pierce stone. The molten lead burned through skin and cloth, searing deep into flesh. The Inquisitor moved his hand slowly, letting each drop fall like rain from hell. The smell of burning filled the air, thick and choking. Alarico did not flinch. His gaze remained steady, his lips moving in silent prayer. "Confess," he whispered. "Speak truth, and you will be forgiven." Between sobs, Elira screamed that she knew nothing, that she had never spoken against the church. But the sprinkler continued its dreadful work, drip by drip, until her voice broke into hoarse silence. Her body slumped forward, smoke rising from her wounds. Father Tomas turned away, bile rising in his throat. He could no longer tell if this was purification or madness. But to the king, it was justice. He signaled for the device to be set down, and the Inquisitor obeyed, wiping sweat from his brow. Alarico knelt beside the girl's motionless body. He touched her charred shoulder and whispered, "Your soul has been tested. May it find peace." He rose to his feet, his expression serene, as though witnessing a holy miracle. The next day, the palace was quieter than usual. Servants moved like shadows, fearful even of breathing too loudly. The queen avoided her husband's gaze, her heart breaking with each muffled cry from below. She knew that every confession extracted through fire only fed his growing obsession. That night, another trial began. This time the accused was a nobleman, Don Rodrigo, once a trusted advisor to the throne. The charges were grave: conspiracy, blasphemy, and secret correspondence with foreign heretics. But his true crime was pride. He had dared to question the king's decrees. Rodrigo stood tall despite the chains around his wrists. His voice was steady. "Your Majesty," he said, "I have served you for 20 years. I have fought your wars and built your cities. Will you now call me a traitor because I begged for mercy for others?" Alarico's face was stone. "Mercy for the wicked is treason against God." The Inquisitor prepared the device once again, dipping it into molten lead. The hiss of heat filled the chamber, echoing like a serpent's breath. The nobleman watched without fear. "You may burn my flesh," he said, "but you cannot burn truth." Alarico stepped closer, his voice a whisper. All men break when they meet the fire. The lead sprinkler hovered above Rodrigo's chest. Drops fell, sizzling against skin. The nobleman's face twisted, his jaw clenched, but he did not cry out. The king watched with fascination, his heart pounding. Pain was his scripture now, and every scream or silence was a verse. Rodrigo lasted longer than most. Even as blisters formed and blood mingled with molten metal, he spat his defiance. "You are not God's servant," he rasped. "You are his plague." The king's hand trembled. For the first time the words cut deep. He turned away, leaving the inquisitors to finish their work. As he ascended the steps, the screams followed him like echoes of conscience. Back in his chamber, he poured wine but could not drink. The reflection in the cup showed not a king, but a hollow-eyed fanatic. He told himself that every drop of blood spilled was holy, that every cry was proof of cleansing. Yet in the silence, he heard Elira's voice calling his name. He heard Rodrigo's laughter from the flames. Father Tomas entered quietly. "Your Majesty," he said, "the people are afraid. Even the priests whisper now." "Fear is the beginning of faith," Alarico replied coldly. "Let them tremble. Trembling leads to obedience." The priest bowed but did not move. "And what of you, my king? Does fear lead you to faith or to madness?" For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then Alarico smiled faintly. "Both," he said. "Faith is madness. Only the mad can see God's truth clearly." That night, thunder rolled across the city again. The fires in the dungeons burned long after midnight, and as molten lead dripped in steady rhythm, the king prayed louder than the screams below, his words melting into the crackle of the flames. Dawn broke red over Toledo, the sky painted with smoke from burning rooftops. The city had turned against its king. After years of terror, the people had risen, their voices echoing through the streets like thunder. The bells of the cathedral tolled not for worship but for revolt. But in his private chapel, King Alarico knelt before the altar, muttering prayers through trembling lips. His crown lay beside him, tarnished with soot. "Lord," he whispered. "I have burned the sin from your kingdom. Why then do they curse my name?" His words faded into the silence of marble walls. No divine voice answered. Outside, the palace trembled with chaos. The guards had abandoned their posts, the inquisitors had fled, and the queen's chambers stood empty. Only Father Thomas remained, his heart torn between faith and guilt. He found the king still kneeling, eyes wild with devotion and madness. "Your Majesty," the priest said softly, "the people are breaking through. You must leave." Alarico rose slowly, his voice calm but hollow. "Leave? No, Father. I will not flee from God's test. Let them come, and they shall see his fire." Ignoring Thomas's pleas, the king descended into the dungeons. The torches still burned, casting shadows upon the chamber walls. The lead sprinkler rested on a stone table beside a cold pot of metal scraps. He touched it reverently, his fingers tracing the darkened angels carved into its surface. "You and I, old friend," he whispered, "we have purified so many souls. Perhaps it is time we cleanse one more." The priest followed him down, his voice shaking. "Alarico, stop this. There is no purity in pain. You must end it before the people do." The king turned, his eyes fever bright. "End it? No, Father. I will show them truth once more." The sound of breaking doors echoed above. The mob had entered the palace. Their shouts filled the halls, a storm of fury and grief. The king kindled the coals beneath the crucible, feeding them with his own trembling hands. The flames roared to life, reflecting in his eyes like a mirror of hell. Father Thomas stepped forward, desperate. "Alarico, they will kill you. Please surrender." The king smiled faintly. "I am already dead to them, but I will die in purity." Moments later, the rebels flooded down the staircase, torches blazing. They stopped at the sight before them, the king standing amid instruments of agony, his robes lit by the glow of molten lead. "Behold," he shouted, raising the sprinkler high, "you come to destroy God's will, but I am his flame. Who among you dares challenge the holy fire?" The crowd hesitated. They saw not a divine ruler, but a broken man, trembling in the very chamber where so many had suffered. Father Thomas moved between them, raising his cross. "The fire was never holy," he said. "It was only your pride burning." The king's hand shook. The lead sprinkler tilted, and a single drop of molten lead fell onto his wrist. His cry filled the room as the device slipped from his grasp and clattered to the floor. The rebels surged forward, knocking him down. The crucible tipped over, spilling molten lead across the stones. The silver liquid crawled toward him like a living thing. Alarico tried to crawl away, but the fire reached his robes. Flames engulfed him, devouring silk, flesh, and gold. His screams rose, then broke, echoing through the dungeon until only the crackle of fire remained. The people fell silent, horrified by the very justice they had come to deliver. When the flames died, only ash and twisted metal remained. The lead sprinkler lay beside him, warped and sealed shut by heat. Father Thomas crossed himself, whispering through tears, "May God forgive the king who mistook fire for faith." In the years that followed, the tale of King Alarico II became legend, a warning whispered in churches and palaces alike. Those who burn others in the name of purity, it was said, will one day feel their own fire turn against them.